Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to remind everyone that if you enjoy the podcast, you can show your support by leaving a rating and a review of it wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance-bias and donate anything you can to keep the podcast going. Now, on to today's episode. I've spoken a lot on this podcast about how different Phish years have different personalities. When Attendance Bias was first getting off the ground a number of years ago, I had the unofficial goal to learn more about 1999 and the 1999 Phish calendar year. But at this point, about 5 years in, I think that 1998 is the more intangible year. Everyone loves 1997. We've covered a lot of shows and jams from 1999. But 1998 remains elusive. The band was still funky, but they also kept their guitar-powered speed rock and combined it with a ton of unexpected cover songs that kept the crowd guessing. If we could distill the cagey feeling of 1998 into one show, though, it may be today's. Matt Huber is here to explain what it was like to attend Phish's show from August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley, a classic venue that, in this case, featured Phish at the top of their game during an underexplored summer. Matt and I have a lot to say about today's show, but there's this inescapable feeling that even with a 90-minute episode, there's a lot left unsaid. We talk about the summer of covers, imaginary conversations between band members, and even compare ficus to quadraphonic toppling. I mean, this is a nerdy episode, and we go out there. But maybe what makes 1998 such a great year for Phish has yet to be defined, no matter how much we talk about it. In the meantime, Matt and I give it our best shot today. So let's join Matt Huber to discuss the story of the Ghost, the Velvet Underground, and who should take the high vocal parts in any given song at August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley in East Troy, Wisconsin. Matt, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. We are talking today about what I would consider maybe the consummate 1998 show of Phish. We're talking about August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley. We'll get into what 1998 means to me and what I would imagine it means to a lot of people out there. But when you suggested this, I know it's been released officially by Live Phish, but I am not or was not too familiar with this show. And since I've listened to it, to me, it seems like 1998 in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited to get to it with you. To get to know you, though, as a fan, before we dive into 1998, before we dive into eras or this show specifically, let's learn a little bit about you, Matt, as a fan with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Matt, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember about it?
It was June 13th, 1995 at Riverport Amphitheater in St. Louis. So I just had my 30-year Phish anniversary, however you say that. What I remember is I was very early in my fandom, so I had this kind of list of songs I wanted to hear, and they were like the lamest ones. I wanted to see them play Bouncin' and Sample in a Jar and Sparkle. Like, these were my songs. So I was very sort of like shocked to see some of the jamming that went on, and like they played the Lizards, which I'd never heard of, and found that to be quite stunning and interesting. But I was in a different place in my fandom, but it was still a lot of fun.
How old were you?
So let's see, I was 17. Yeah, something like that.
So do you
16?
think the reason you wanted those songs, those kind of easily digestible early fan favorite songs, was it because you had tapes or a live one or Hoist or like the easily digestible or kind of Phish starter pack?
Yeah, I think, it's just, I started with like Rift, Hoist. I was just drawn to the more, like those songs are kind of like if Phish had singles that actually made it on the radio, those would be their kind of songs. And I just, at the time I found them catchy and sing along. And it took me a while. I remember the first tape I had was Red Rocks 94, 611 94. And I remember the Antelope Jam on that just like changed my whole world. And once I sort of got into them as a sort of jamming vehicle, I quickly drifted away from that kind of focus on their sing-along songs. But they caught me, if you will, with those kind of catchy Phish songs. So.
What are some of your memories of the crowd, if you have any, from your first show? Because as a 16-year-old, I had just turned 15 at my first show. So close to you. And I just remember being blown away because all the concerts and live music that I had been to before that were normie shows. They were shows where there were two openers and the headlining band would play for like, you know, a 2-hour set. They would play their greatest hits or they would save them for the end of the show to close the set with. And you would get the t-shirt. And then it was because what you heard on the radio. Phish is nothing like that. At my first show, it was everything that I knew was turned upside down and missing. So do you remember anything about the feeling you had going to that first show at Riverport in 95?
I don't remember much about that show, which is probably par for the course. I remember, I think my first sort of impact of like the fandom was actually the next year. I did go to 3 of the 4 Red Rock shows in 96. The infamous ones where there were like riots and they were invited not to come back before 2009. But I remember the lot scene there and just being blown away by all the kind of DIY merch, like all the song-based shirts, you know, Glide, that was
the Tide logo.
Tide,
yeah, of course.
And stuff like that. And then, of course, I was at the show where they were passing out flyers to try to get the fans to say a hood in the middle of the Harry Hood, and which actually happened for the first time at those Red Rock shows. So I got a real entry point to like the sort of obsessive fandom and how much playfulness there is within the fandom and so forth. So that was really a sort of mind-blowing experience there.
I had a similar experience where my first show is just kind of blurred with like crystallized memories that last less than half a second of what I actually remember. And most of my memories are of listening to that first show. Whereas my second show, which was almost a year later, a calendar year later, I remember almost everything from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what was your most recent Phish show and what did you think about it?
I was lucky to go to December 30th, 2025 at MSG. You know, that's a hallowed date in the Phish calendar. I thought the show was good. A great show, actually. But, you know, it wasn't like up there with some of the other 1230s in history. I was really into that Ghost jam. And one thing, they've kind of been using Ghost weirdly lately as kind of a closer or a kind of rockin' encore song, which I feel like is not. So when they opened up with Ghost, I think they opened up with Ghost the second set and kind of took it for a pretty deep and patient jam, I was like all about that. I thought that was super cool.
So today's show, we're talking about Alpine Valley. And you mentioned that your first show was in St. Louis, so you seem like a Midwest fan,
Definitely,
as your origin story, at least.
Exactly, yeah.
I have never been to either one of these venues, so I want to put it to you. Let's say the band announced their summer tour tomorrow, and they're playing Alpine Valley and Deer Creek, and you have to pick one. You only have the resources for one. Which one do you pick and why?
Gotta go with Deer Creek on this, sadly, because I know we're talking about Alpine Valley. Alpine Valley is a great venue. It's a bit out of the way in East Troy, Wisconsin, kind of up there north of Chicago on the way to Milwaukee, if I recall. It's kind of in a very farm-based region. But the main thing with Alpine Valley is, unless you're lucky to get pavilions, the lawn is like infamous sort of steep mountain. And if you're not lucky enough to get it into the lawn early, you're just way up. Sort of seems like, you know, like eons away from the band. Even when I was young going to Alpine Valley, it's hard on your back and just being on that lawn is just terrible. And of course, Deer Creek, some of my favorite shows I've attended are also at Deer Creek, 810, 97, 725, 99. I think I'd have to go Deer Creek.
So we're talking about a show from 1998, and I'm going to bring that up over and over again. It's slowly becoming my favorite year of Phish. I think it's kind of the black sheep of the 90s. But since the summer of 98 was, or is, colloquially known as the summer of covers, if you could choose one song for Phish to cover, whether it's then or now, that they haven't ever played, so you can't bring anything back, it's got to be a debut, what song would it be?
Probably like almost an obvious choice, but And I have the Grateful Dead high in my heart, in my mind right now with the recent passing of Bobby Weir. And I love Phish improvisation, so my song would have to be Phish playing Dark Star. I think that would be amazing. And honestly, to hear Paige and Trey play Dark Star with Phil and Friends and those 99 shows is one of the many highlights of that run they did. That would be the song. And of course, this summer we're talking about. It's hard for me to think of a more special moment than when they played Terrapin Station on the third anniversary of Jerry's death. So, yeah, I'd go with Dark Star. Why not Dark Star?
Yeah, right. That's a new T-shirt. Why not Dark Star with Trey and Paige on either side?
Exactly.
Well, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show? However you choose to interpret that word, that adjective.
I'm going to cheat a little and give you a couple. The first is more disturbing than weird, but it was actually just maybe, I don't know, 50 to 100 miles from Alpine Valley in 97. I was at the Tinley Park show out in Chicago. My brother and I got peed on by the guy behind us during Prince Caspian. It's kind of like a song that nowadays I think a lot of people are never, it's usually coming out of a jam, and it usually sort of ripcords a jam. And yeah, so we got peed all over during Prince Caspian, which was just really annoying.
All right, wait. Before you go any further, we got to unpack this a little bit. So I've never been to Tinley Park. From what I've heard and what I understand, the sound quality is not very good. It doesn't get high marks as a venue. But just physically, was there someone on a level behind you? Like, were you in the last row of 100s and the person behind you, the guilty party, was the first row of the 200s? How does this geography work?
I'm a geographer, by the way, so that's a great question. We were in the pavilion, and I don't think we were like in different sections, but it was tilted enough where he was just sort of high enough above us and standing that when the trajectory of it really got all over our I think we had some bags, which seems odd, but we had coats or something. We had a bunch of stuff on the ground. That's what really took the brunt of it. But I remember it was all over our pants. And I remember I turned around and I'm like, "Are you peeing?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry." And I was just like, "No, how can you be doing this?" And we were going on tour together that summer, and that was the second we were going all the way to the Great Wind from St. Louis, 8-6. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of a long journey, to be honest. But I want to mention the other thing that honestly, the weirdest thing I've seen at a Phish show has to be on that same tour. I was at Darien Lake in 8/14/97. And Ken Kesey and his Merry Pranksters coming on stage and singing their weird sort of clown bozo behind a funk jam that Phish was playing that prevented them from going into Mockingbird from Forbin's. That was definitely by far the weirdest thing I've seen at a show. It was just really wild.
I have to say, I think I'm coming up on something like 250 episodes of this show, and that story comes up. That has to be by far the highest percentage answer of weirdest thing I've seen. And it's only been like 6 or 7 people have said that, but for the amount of weird stuff that happens at a show, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was very weird.
When was this show played?
Our show today is August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley. And I feel like we could talk about Phish in 1998 forever, for an hour and a half. I don't know if we have that kind of time, but the more I listen to 98, the more I want to talk about and analyze and break down 98, because the band was kind of evolving out of the funk of 97, like you just mentioned about that famous Mockingbird, The Funk Is Too Deep. But they were also on the other end of the year, right? Once the fall tour comes around, they were kind of getting into their trademark ambience of 1999. But also there was this like amazing dexterity and power rock at any time in between. Like 1998 was a grab bag year, like a transitional year between 97 and 99. And in my opinion, grossly underrated. Like I said before, you can't talk about 98 because most people's first association with it is the summer of covers. So I
Absolutely.
didn't see any shows on this tour, but I do remember following the set lists on Phish.net, and it seemed like the band began a joke when they covered Sexual Healing with Fishman on vocals at the
Mhm.
Ventura County Fairgrounds. That was on
Mhm.
July 20th, and
Mhm.
then followed it up a few days later in Dallas at the Starplex Amphitheater with Albuquerque with Neil
Mhm.
Young, which would become like a staple for at least the
Mhm.
end of 1.0. Then it caught fire. You mentioned Riverport earlier. They played If You Need a Fool. Today's show, they played Been Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction. I Get a Kick Out of You, the Frank Sinatra staple at Deer Creek. Rhinoceros, the the one that everyone wants them to bring back, but I don't know if it would sound the same. I think it's a perfect one-off, and it was a perfect performance. Running with the Devil at Lakewood Amphitheater. And then you mentioned the Terrapin Station at Virginia Beach. To me, that was the peak of the
Yeah.
summer of covers. Although
Yeah.
Terrapin Station didn't end it because they also played Trenchtown Rock by Bob Marley
Mhm.
and Burning Down the House in
Right.
Syracuse at subsequent shows.
Yeah, and I really think this show, 8198, kind of really ushered in the trend, right? Because, I don't know, sexual healing, Fishman will always play sort of jokey songs, and If You Need a Fool's kind of not, it's not one of these classic rock songs, right? But this show, they open with Ramble On, just couldn't be more cool than that. And then Been Caught Stealing's another sort of just like unbelievably classic song. So it really felt like they were really like leaning into the trend that had started at this particular show.
The story that I heard, and I've never been able to confirm this or find a second source, I don't even remember where I heard it the first time, but is that after the band sound check, they would have dinner, right, catering, and they would
Mhm.
have music on in the
Mhm.
background and just on a predetermined playlist. And they decided at each show to learn one song that was on the playlist as they heard it, like as they were eating or as it was playing. And they said, you know what, that would be fun to cover. And that kind of accounts for the seemingly random assortment of songs by genre and by time period. And to me, that just seems believable enough. It's so basic, but it makes sense when you kind of get to know the collective personality of Phish, the band. That it's like, oh, that sounds fun. Let's play that, which is like
Mhm.
Rhinoceros by the Smashing Pumpkins and then
Yeah.
Trenchtown Rock by Bob Marley.
And I had to go to a family vacation, so we only caught the first night of Deer Creek, and we missed the Rhinoceros. And we were big Smashing Pumpkins fans. We were just heartbroken to have missed that one. That must have been super cool to see.
When I was in college and Napster was becoming popular, I remember downloading that because I didn't know what the song sounded like. I liked
Mm.
the Smashing Pumpkins, but I was more of a Pearl Jam guy when it
Yeah.
came to, what's your 90s grunge obsession. So
Yeah.
to me, the Smashing Pumpkins, I knew the radio hits, but I wasn't really deep into them. So fast forward back to the 20 in 2000 basically, or 2001, and I would see Phish Rhinoceros, and that was the era when everything on Napster was mislabeled, right, as a Phish song or Bare Naked Ladies, who knows what. And when I heard it, obviously I could tell that it was Phish, but it was this very poor recording, audience recording, but it came
Yeah.
through really well. And then when I was able to find the actual Smashing Pumpkins recording of the song, I thought this just seems made for each other. There are some
Yeah.
of these covers that are goofs, like you mentioned, like If You Need a Fool,
Yeah.
but Rhinoceros, they took very seriously.
And it's not one you mess around with. So
I hope not. They
yeah.
certainly didn't. But
Yeah.
other than the covers, I thought I was trying to make a list of when I think of Phish in 98, why do I love it so much? Here's what I came up with, and tell me if you have anything to add that you would take away or that you would disagree with. So, Phish in 1998 as a title, right? An outline. And here are the points underneath it. So, unexpected cover songs, yes, we've gotten that. Searing guitar rock jams, a lot of guitar forward rock jams,
Mm-hmm.
weird backwards playing ambience,
Mm-hmm.
songs that would be recorded eventually for the story of the ghost or were being recorded. So, a heavy rotation of those songs and kind of a lack of gags, unless you consider the cover songs a gag or a gimmick. That's
Yeah,
kind of what I picture for Phish in 98.
absolutely. The hinge point of 98 was that ambient set at Lemon Whale, the fourth set, the secret set, which was to me some of the most beautiful improvisational music Phish has ever played, as far as I'm concerned. And that kind of patient ambient sound you really do hear that, particularly, and we'll talk about later, the tweezer from today. But to me, like, getting from that more sort of gritty funk of 97 to this kind of more soft and sort of beautiful, melodious type of ambient music was really important. And for me, what I realized about this show is I loved it while I was in person, but it was really, I realized that the Story of the Ghost came out in the fall of
Yeah, in
98.
October.
And I remember reading a lot of the journalism hits that they did for that album. And it was a lot of Trey and Paige trying to explain what they were doing with the shift to more groove and funk-based jamming, which, to be honest, I was like a fan that discovered sort of 94 Phish. So that's kind of what sold me on the Phish. And I remember going on summer tour in 97 and went to several fall 97 shows and being a little like, what is going on? Like, why are they sounding so different and what is happening? And it was really those interviews where they actually said they're really, they've always been trying to create jams that are less centered on the guitar and less centered on Trey kind of leading all the jams, which obviously he's very good at, but they wanted a more collective type of approach to improvisation. And they wanted to develop more patience and how the funk kind of allowed them this kind of groove space to kind of build out of, right? It's that patience and that kind of beautiful improvisations that come out of this music that I think they were still developing at the time. And I remember Paige in one interview said that they were really listening to a lot of like Miles Davis electric music, like groove-based, funk-based type of open improvisational music that's really, you don't know where it's going to go. And so once I read those interviews, I kind of realized what they were trying to do. And I realized like how much I actually really liked it. And I've grown to really prefer this more patient collective improv. And then it was only then that sort of going back to these tapes of 8/1/98 and particularly the tweezer and thinking like, this is the style of improv that I think is like the best stuff that Phish does, to be honest.
Sure. And then toward the end of the year and toward the end of the fall tour, when they would play Loaded by the Velvet Underground, where they've kind of left the funk. I won't say left it behind because you can go to a show tomorrow and hear a great tube that's based on a funk riff, but I guess stopped making it being the focus of their improvisation, that it's kind of a lot more downbeat, it's a lot slower, and it's a lot moodier, I guess I could say.
And then speaking of covers, they go ahead and play Dark Side of the Moon 2 days later.
Right. One of my favorite shows ever, but that's been covered on this show, on this podcast. So anyone listening, if you want to hear about someone who was there, wait for the fact check. I'll give you the date and who was there.
Set 1.
But let's get into this show, August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley. You mentioned a little bit earlier, they opened the show with the Led Zeppelin classic, Ramble On. And my first note was, wait, what? I mean, I can't believe, I love hearing Phish play any Led Zeppelin, of course. It's in their DNA, obviously. I was at the Halloween show, or the pre-Halloween show, October 30th, 2010, when they did the fake out of everyone that they can't play Led Zeppelin on Halloween because they played all the, snippets of songs the night before. But this is a very well-practiced, serious Ramble On. Like, I know the summer of covers has been exciting the whole way through, but this had to be on another level.
Yeah. And in the audience recording, you can really hear the crowd just go bonkers. and being there, the crowd was going so nuts. I actually remember, my memory is that there was something with the PA where the music was not so clear when they first started playing and the crowd started going so crazy that it took me a while to understand what was happening. But once we did, it was just like, okay, this is, to have Phish open with a song they've never played before and such a classic song was just, it really was a great, great start.
of wine, such a pleasant state. Now it's time for me to go. All the moonlight's my way.
I got that sense from the audience recording what you just said. I thought I love the waves of applause as the crowd thinks they know what Phish is playing, and then they get quiet, like to kind of confirm mentally, like, am I hearing what I think I'm hearing? And then they go nuts once it sinks in. This is to me where Trey plays that the Jimmy Page guitar part, like that part, and it's just, wait, we're really doing this.
Yeah. And you got to give Page credit for doing a very good Robert Plant, you know, that kind of high Page voice. He did a great job with it and sounded really good.
That's what I mean when I say they took it seriously. If they were joking, it would have been Trey singing it.
Well, he tried to sing very high later in the show. We'll talk about that.
And then talk about a follow-up. Imagine this, right? For everyone who hasn't listened to this show, or maybe you weren't into Phish at the time, so they play Ramble On the full way through to Fidelity. And then everyone's going nuts. And then Mike's song, talk about a follow-up. Like, we live in a time right now when you can set your watch to the fact that the moment dance is going to be played second, no matter what's played first. But here we are listening to Ramble On into Mike's song.
Yeah, and I don't know if I had the tapes at the time, but I really, like, to me, this was a continuation of Hampton 11/22/97. This, I think they might have opened set one with Mike's song, and then 4/3/98 Island Tour. That might be my favorite show ever. I mean, apart from Cypress, I mean, just unbelievable. So these first set Mike's grooves were kind of a thing in the last couple of years. This one didn't disappoint. What I really loved about Mike's songs in this era is that, you know, typically early 90s, mid 90s Mike's song, the jam kind of comes out of the gate like fierce and snarly, sort of rockin', raging guitar. But what they started doing, obviously, in 97, they starting the Mike's jam with just that funk, right? Just Trey would just sit back on the wah-wah pedal and sort of lay down a funk groove. And I think perhaps the Hampton and Island Tour ones get a little more exploratory than this one. But I just love that kind of just starting it slow and patient with that funk groove and then letting the Mike's jam kind of come out of that. The other really weird, sort of interesting thing about this jam is usually they go to those middle chords like dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that at all. They just let the jam kind of peter out, and then Trey hits this F, not to get too technical, Mike's jam is an F sharp, and usually after those chords they might go to an F to do the second jam or to go into simple, which they often do, and simple is in F as well, and that riff starts with that F. And here, he didn't do the middle chords. The jam kind of peters out and he just hits an F.
I heard that. I thought they were going to play simple and it's only 1 second long.
As it happens, I started to investigate this yesterday, actually. what comes next, which we'll talk about, is Esther, which is in F. And so I think this was one of Trey's musicology ideas, like what you put in the Mike's groove, something that could be an F, and usually it's simple, but here they were able to just have Esther kind of come out of that weird F goo that came out of it. So it was super cool. As anyone who looks at the set list of the first Esther in 139 shows, so it's something of a bust out. And again, a lot of those previous Mike songs I told you about had interesting middle songs. I think My Old Home Place is one of them, or Esther was just, unexpected and just a really cool idea to put in the middle of Mike's groove, right? And Esther's a very strange song.
It's the weirdest song.
But in many ways, it captures like what I love about Phish, particularly their early kind of compositional type of writing, because this song, for the weird lyrics, also has just these gorgeous melodies, these kind of like almost childlike, beautiful Trey soaring guitar melodies that I think define songs like Squirming Coil or Divide Sky. And those melodies are really a big part of Esther, particularly the way the song ends. When I go into Phish shows, even back in 98, I'm always in the first set. I want to see them play and hopefully nail some of their difficult compositional type of songs like Ariba, Fluffhead, or something like that, just because that's something unique about Phish that I think no other jam band can really match, is this incredible sort of compositional type of material they have, which is one reason I'm one of the few that I'm still I'm very defensive about songs like Petrichor and even Drift While You're Sleeping. Like, I think when Trey writes these songs that have these sort of more complicated compositional stuff, I just want to defend that practice because it's important to me. But anyway, Esther's one of those songs. It's got some pretty complicated material and it's beautiful. And it was a great Mike's groove. I don't think there's another Mike's groove that has Esther in it, as far as I know.
Without checking, I would probably think you're right. I would think so. But yeah, we get to Weekapaw groove and Mike just goes off as typical, in a good way, as usual. And it's a very short intro before Page joins in on piano with some insane finger tapping guitar work around 4 minutes. And I can imagine being there, and you could speak to this, obviously. It's so exciting that it's almost exhausting. Were you on the lawn for these shows?
I'm pretty sure I actually was like at the very tippy top of the pavilion. So I think I did have seats. I was lucky for this particular show.
And Weekapaw has this kind of in-between funk and ambience that
absolutely
we talked about describes 1998 with like a dollop of rock. Even with stop-start jamming.
Yeah, they got stop start, they got real wah wah funk groove, but then they'll bring back, to me, Weekapog also just is great for sort of soaring Trey, melodious soloing over the Weekapog. So that they kind of rotated back and forth between that framework. And to me, this jam was a little more exploratory and exciting than even the Mike's jam. So, and I think it's a bit longer. So it was really kind of, again, very early in the show still, but they were really doing some seriously interesting jamming with that kind of funk and soloing, rotating type of groove.
And it's not just jamming, although I do agree with you. At the very end, when they're getting ready to end the song, they just speed up to this like unimaginable tempo.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
just for fun, I guess.
Yeah, they could feel the energy. I think there was a lot of energy in the room.
Yeah, and then they go right into Gaiuti, which is kind of the favorite of the year. I looked it up. It was played 20 times that year as it was being recorded for the story of the ghost. So there's that check mark of what is 1998 made up of? Songs being recorded for Story of the Ghost, even though it debuted 4 years prior. Gaiuti was a big hit once it was solidified. I think in 1995 it was solidified as the version we know, and it was played 20 times. That's a lot.
And to me, the song, for reasons I just explained, is very important to me, as I would say Trey's kind of last real epic composition that, I think is on the level of the Rebos and Fluffheads and YAMs of the early days. I even love Time Turns Elastic.
I was right about to ask you. It was right on the tip of my tongue.
I really love Petrichor, but I think there's something that he, for whatever reason, is just not quite on the level of just brilliance and musical inventiveness as these early. But I think Gaiuti is on that level. And it being 94, it was, I think, Trey's last attempt to really write this kind of compositional epic. And I remember once I kind of appreciated that compositional part of Phish's canon, when I started going to shows, the one song I wanted to see was Gaiuti. I finally got one in Omaha in 1996 in the fall tour. And I remember just being blown away, so excited to get that. And I can't remember if this is my second Gaiuti or my probably my third or fourth, but I'm again always, this time of Phish's trajectory, as you said, they played Gaiuti a lot in 98 as part of the Story of the Ghost type of album. And I think a lot of people that started to go to Phish shows to just see them jam started to get a little exhausted by Gaiuti, as nowadays people get exhausted by the petrichors and stuff like this. But for me, if it's the first set, I'll take Gaiuti over Bouncin' or over to see them play a really hard technical composition like this is just exciting. I mean, it's an incredible feat of musical prowess to be able to play a song like this. So
yeah, let that be a lesson to all you 3.0 and 4.0 fans out there listening. There have been jaded vets forever. There have always been people who have been sick of something, no matter how far back you go. But then you get a crazy rarity, right? Gaiuti played 20 times. You could go to every other show almost and see it. They follow it up with Ficus, another song that was recorded for the Story of the Ghost. Ficus was played just 5 times in 1998 and just 6 times to date. I'll preempt my fact check. I'll tell you now, the most recent, as of today's recording, it was played August 11th, 2024 at Bethel Woods. Yeah. So it's not common at all.
And the weird thing is I saw it 2 days before at Riverport, 7/29/98. Well, I was trying to remember, and I honestly can't remember, but since Story of the Ghost had not come out yet, I was just trying to think, did I even know what this was? Or did I have any idea what Ficus was? But I will say that, again, in retrospect, once you started to learn that Story of the Ghost was not completely, but a lot of the songs, including Ficus, were these songs that just emerged from jams, right? They did all that jamming at the barn, and they created all these grooves that then they took some of those instrumental grooves and put lyrics over them. And I think Ficus is one of the coolest examples of that. course, the Sicket disc is another example where like they made songs out of all these jams they did. But Ficus is like, it's such a cool groove.
I don't know what to make of it. No, I still don't. It's 28 years later since this show was played, approximately, give or take a few months. But I don't know what to make of Ficus. It's cool for the novelty factor, but I wouldn't feel weird going to the bathroom during it. I mean, it's just under 3 minutes also. There's not much to make of it. It's an odd duck.
I think that really that bass line is what defines it, like do 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 do.
Yes,
do, do, do,
absolutely.
And you have to think like if Phish actually was jamming in a show and they came upon to that kind of cool groove where Mike is playing that bass line, you would probably be like, wow, they just came up with that groove. That's super cool. The fact that they turned it into a song with these kind of strange lyrics is another decision. But I always, when they play it, I'm always like, well, it's just a cool groove, a cool jam. And I think it's a cool idea to make songs out of jams, which is what they were doing.
And then after Ficus, we are firmly in the new for 1998 segment of the show. They play Birds of a Feather, which debuted at the Island Tour earlier in the year. This is already the 11th time it's been played in 1998. So if you were trading tapes or were lucky enough to have a high-speed internet connection, at least as high speed as they got, and paying attention, this song was already familiar to you at this point by the time you got to Alpine Valley. It was also an immediate hit, which is not always the case with new songs.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had the Island Tour by this point, so I knew this. And I actually went to 4/5/98, but couldn't go to the others, sadly. But I remember the buzz about this song on 4/4/98 from my friends that went to the show that I couldn't go to. And it really jammed out at the Island Tour. What's sort of interesting about 98 Birds that sort of later on in the summer and the fall is that they tend to be very constrained, right? Like they don't jam much. And then there's all these really jammed out versions in 99. But this one really feels to me like a Chalk Dust or something, old school Chalk Dust. It's really, a raging guitar solo that really builds tension and peaks. But yeah, at the time, out of Ficus, it was, some welcome sort of energy into the building.
The exact same thought. I thought that there was nothing beyond type 1 jamming, but Trey loves the lead melody. He'll never give that up. And there's just a hell of a lot of energy throughout before they finally get a cool down. We're already almost at the end of the set with Lawn Boy. Finally, with the, as you mentioned, obscenely large lawn at Alpine Valley.
I never thought of that connection, but that's a good point.
And nothing crazy about Lawn Boy. And then they close the set already with Funky Bitch with a great organ solo and an explosive guitar solo. So I feel like they kind of had to give themselves a break after an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's weird. Funky Bitch is not not a regular closing song, although it works very well in that slot, right? It's just a rocker. It really brings a lot of energy into the close. So it's sort of surprising to me that it doesn't close more. And I also love that. I think if I'm being honest, I'm not a huge fan of Phish playing blues music. They do their best with it, but it's just not a great fit. Like My Soul. If I never see them play,
that's the song I was thinking of too.
If I never see them play My Soul again, that would be great. But I do think if they're going to play these blues numbers, they should give Paige a solo and Trey a solo. So it's kind of random. Sometimes in a possum, he'll just lay back and let Page take a solo. And I think that's how it should be. Like they should both be taking solos on these blues songs.
Well, that's how it normally goes. Because
Yeah.
with this version of Funky Bitch, there's an organ solo and then a guitar solo.
Yeah.
My favorite versions of Jesus Left Chicago is the same exact
For sure.
routine. And I don't know. I think that's what they've stuck to, you know, and the rhythm section, Mike and Phish are just kind of locked in until the song's over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
And we're already in set 2. They open, as was the style at the time, with Piper, with a soft, slow intro, how it used to be. It reaches a big peak, and then it rushes, like swirling, repeating before the traditional dropout, which I miss. I really miss everyone talks about the slow build Piper, which I love too, but I miss the like when they just completely drop out with that slow guitar line.
And it's funny, back in these days, I think Piper wasn't as much of a jam vehicle that we think of it as today. It was more about this, again, as you're saying, like building that kind of swirling energy around the chord progression and the lyrics and the kind of building that within the framework of that progression. Nowadays, like the Piper will just go into a pretty raging, crazy jam, but not so much here. And I think as an opener, it kind of is nice as that kind of like just setting the stage for future improvisation, but not quite being a jam vehicle.
I agree. 1999 and 2000 probably were kind of the peaks of that kind of Piper. I know there are a lot of people who would love 2.0 versions, but to me, a lot of 2.0 jams after 2003, at least, yeah, it's a great version of Piper. I'm thinking particularly of the one at SPAC in June.
Absolutely.
But
So
it's
good.
really that jam could have come from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's neither here nor there. In this show, after the opening Piper, which I agree with you, it's kind of like a table setter for Wilson, which also you don't usually hear in the second set.
And this Wilson is, usually Wilson sounds about the same every time they play. But this Wilson has what we call the extra mustard. It goes into this like dark heavy metal jam where they really just sort of hung out in that heavy metal shredding jam for a good, 3 minutes or so, which is way longer than any Wilson jam is known for doing. Wilson to deliver a type 2 jam of any kind, but I think it had a little bit of extra, and it was highly interesting for Wilson to have that really dark heavy metal jam.
I agree. My notes have pretty much the same thing. And the last thing I wrote of it is this in capital letters. This is what I want from Wilson.
Yeah. It's about the best you can hope from Wilson, I would say.
Yeah. And then they go into what I think is the centerpiece of the set, probably, is 2001. Like there's an immediate drop at the end of Wilson into 2001 with Cross-Eyed and Painless teases, which they did a lot this year in the show. One my favorite show of the year, attendance bias acknowledged, is December 29th, 98. They did the same thing during the 2001 intro. Trey would tease Cross-Eyed and Painless.
Yeah, I was there at the MSG around 98 as well. I've been going systematically through 1993 and 94 lately, which I've never done. And it strikes you how just by the book 2001s were back then, like they just sort of play a little bit of funk and then play the melody and it's over. I think in 97, it really opened up 2001 to be this kind of dance party and this kind of more open groove based thing where they can throw in teases like this. And super, super fun to just, again, sort of establish groove and dance and energy in the set.
Yeah, those 1993 versions were usually second set openers that lasted literally 3 minutes or less.
Exactly.
Even.
Yep.
And that was it. And you're right. They expanded when they started unexpectedly jamming songs. 2001 was kind of the biggest beneficiary of that. And the first chorus, to that point, the first chorus of this 2001 is at 7 minutes.
Yeah.
This is a big vibe show, kind of like Mike's song in the first set.
Am I misremembering? I know I should know this because we're talking about it, but I'm not even sure they got to the second chorus because as we're going to talk about, they go into Megillah and then they come back to 2001, but only for like 2 measures before they bust into the next one, right?
Yeah, I timed it actually because I think you're right. I don't think they get to a second chorus of 2001 because Fishman, like you said, just starts playing the typical bop hi-hat beat. It's like, and all of a sudden Trey is playing Megillah. It's almost like a signal. It's like a sign.
Yeah.
So Fishman, all he has to do is play a jazz beat on either the ride cymbal or the hi-hat. I couldn't quite tell, to the end of the 2001, and it triggered Trey to play Megillah. It's true inspiration. It is exact improvisation. Like you could tell, no one else on the stage, including Trey, knew they were going to play it until they started playing it. And like what a treat it is. And they go back into 2001 for literally 8 seconds.
Yeah. I was just reminding myself, like, this was the first Megillah in over a year, and it would be the last Megillah before the year 2000. So, like, this was a rarity. And for them to just bust into it, it's a complicated jazz composition. Again, it's not an easy thing to play. They got off to a bit of a sort of a wonky start where they weren't sure where the bridge was. But once they locked it in, it was like they were playing bop music
Well,
at
that's what
Alpine
happens
Valley.
when you improvise, right? When no one
Yeah.
knows it's going to happen, it takes you a second to get yourself,
Yeah.
especially in front of what, 17,000 people or 16,000 people?
Yeah, thousands of people. And it's, yeah, it's a real, like a hard bop song, a cool composition. It has the ability, again, for Trey and Paige to take these kind of jazzy solos. One of the things I love about Phish is Phish introduced me to jazz, is how I got into jazz. These days, like, first of all, they haven't played Megillah. If I'm looking at this correctly, they haven't played Megillah since 2003. So that would be quite a bust out. Although Paige often plays it in that little part of Simple, if you know what I mean, after the bebop line or whatever it is.
Yes, yeah, when he does his little riff, yeah.
Yeah, Phish doesn't. They don't play their jazz songs much anymore. Like, God, I would kill to have them play the song Caravan, which is this Duke Ellington song they used to play.
Yep.
And the way
Take
Trey
the
plays that
A-Train.
melody, Take the A Train, Don Ali, they used to play all these jazz standards, but they actually wrote a kind of jazz standardy song in Megillah, and it'd be cool. They should bring it back. And it was a real surprise to come out of a 2001 jam and super fun.
So let's get this straight. Phish playing blues, no. Phish
Yeah,
playing
exactly.
jazz, go for it.
Yeah, and I think that they actually spent, if I'm remembering, in 1988 and 89, they like became a jazz band, and
The Johnny B. Fishman Jazz Ensemble.
They learn the chops, right? There's something about blues where it's less about the chops, it's more about the feeling, and it's just something that I don't think they're great at. But jazz, they really nail it. It's fun.
Yeah, no one's going to argue about the chops that they have for jazz.
They have
At
chops.
least I don't think. Someone might, but I won't. So after 2001, though, the 8 seconds of 2001, that is, they slammed right into Tweezer, which I said before that 2001 might be the centerpiece of the set. I forgot about this Tweezer, which I'll say again is probably the centerpiece of the set.
Oh, absolutely. And I just don't understand how they choreograph this live. Nowadays, I think they have these talkback mics where they can kind of say, like, let's go back to the song. I don't think they can talk to each other, but like, I don't know how. I mean, I would think Trey must have like signaled to Fishman, like, go back to 2001 for just a bit, because they just bust right into Tweezer out of after those 8 seconds. And at any time they're going to go into Tweezer, the crowd's going to go nuts and it's going to be super exciting. But that just brought this kind of extra, like, Megillah 2001 now back in, or right into Tweezer, and the energy went bananas. As much as I love this show, like, I often say it's one of the best shows I've ever attended. I just hit my 97th show, so I'm getting close to 100.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
But I was really shocked when re-listening to this show to know, like, there's just not a ton of type 2 jamming in the show at large. And I think, again, re-listening to the tapes, it's just this Tweezer. It's just so unbelievable that it kind of anchored the whole show for me. I mean, there's all this other stuff that's cool, but in terms of jamming, it's this Tweezer, right?
Well, let
And
me
again,
ask, what about the show gives you attendance bias? Why did you pick this one of the 96 others you could have chosen?
Again, it's the one. Maybe 725.99 is the one I say is the best or my most favorite show I went to. But this one, again, it's not just the jams, right? It's these covers that were so shocking and exciting to see. It is like this really cool Mike's groove in the first set. But what I realized by going back to it is how much my love of this show really hinges on this Tweezer. It's kind of lifted the entire jam-based analysis of the show, because, again, if you start off a set with a Type 1 Piper, a Wilson, and 2001, you're already starting to be like, well, where's the big jam, right? and of course, out of this tweezer, there's not much jamming that comes after it, right? So it's really this tweezer, and the tweezer was so amazing. And again, in the beyond, when I got the tapes of this show, it kind of personified what I wanted a Phish jam to sound like. It became the platonic ideal of what I want a Phish jam, the direction I want it to go. It just that's what sort of made me think of this as like one of my favorite shows ever. It's just one jam, to be honest.
Was it that layered, repetitive guitar part? I wrote down at around 8 minutes that, all in caps, this is what the 1998 sound is to me.
Yeah. And again, the tweezer jam starts with Trey softly playing wah pedal funk, right? And to me, that if you read Rob Mitchum's amazing newsletter, when he started getting into the 97 shows, he kind of, that was his theory of the funk, is that it creates this bass, and what really comes out of the funk is like what matters. Like it's a landing place that gets them to another place that they can kind of go into some interesting and open improvisation. So once Trey lays down those funk chords, you hear Page starts to play a little piano, and then Mike changes the key with his bass, and it just opens up. And to me, what I think is most important for Phish improvisation is, are they being patient, right? Are they kind of letting grooves sort of develop organically, and no one's trying to force anything? And to me, again, this jam is kind of the platonic ideal of that. You just feel like the Trey, again, he just starts repeating these notes, and it feels like this sort of swirling, beautiful, hypnotic type of melody that's just kind of effortlessly emerging from that funk groove, right? as time went on, I also tended to want Phish at the time to play more sort of melodic, or what we now call bliss jamming, right? But back in these days, bliss jamming was not so common, right?
Right.
It was something that was really rare. So again, this tweezer, it just gets just gorgeous, right? It's just beautiful. And then I remember going to shows in 99 and 2000. I'm like, I want them to get back to that bliss space, right? And now in 3.0 and 4.0, it's kind of like almost a crutch that they kind of go into that kind of pretty jamming. But back then it was just something new, and just felt like, yeah, just utterly gorgeous, beautiful, patient jamming.
It didn't sound like everyone was whipped into a frenzy all of a sudden, but it was like slightly more and more attentive, and people were being taken on a little bit more and more of an adventure that by like 10 seconds at a time. So that eventually by the end, by like 14 minutes, the band is still kind of meandering, but in a very purposeful way. That sounds
Yes.
kind of like an oxymoron, but I stick to it. It's a very
Yes.
psychedelic swirl. And then it turns to double time at 16
Yes.
minutes into
Yes.
chaos. And like the last minute or so of it,
Yes.
we've kind of time traveled. Now we're in 1999. We got a sneak peek as to what's to come in about 5 months from this date.
Yeah, it goes from that like gorgeous, patient swirl to this kind of almost like menacing, sort of like chromatic kind of melody that's starting to sort of chase you around the venue. It's odd, like that. Really, like I would say, like the last 8 minutes of the song are a bit are a bit meandering, but it was that first kind of 4 minutes of this just beautiful, patient, hypnotic glory that kind of again just personified, epitomized what I want a Phish song to sound like. And I actually think, listening to it again yesterday, actually, that would have been cool if they kind of saw where that weird chromatic kind of chasey sounds with the double time that you're talking about, if they kind of had let that breathe a little longer and seen where that had gone, because of course they ended up just going into Fluffhead, right? But I think there was more room. And now we kind of look at 35-minute tweezers as kind of like, oh, that's just a Tuesday, right? That's just normal.
How lucky are we?
But here, this one, it's what, like 16, 17 minutes, 18 minutes, and it could have. I felt like it could have gone longer if it built off that weirdness at the end.
Well, you mentioned they go into Fluffhead. I see this as from complete space into complete structure. You've been talking a lot
Absolutely.
about their
Yeah.
Trey, especially his compositions, his kind of complex come for the jam, stay for the, or come for the prog, stay for the jam sort of mentality that
Absolutely.
Fluffhead was kind of as wild and borderless, kind of like an amoeba that Tweezer was. Fluffhead is very hard edges. And it's a very welcome structure as it starts up. It's a standard great version. I didn't have any notes after that.
I will note that it's jam charted. It's one of the jam charted Fluffheads. And obviously jam chart is a weird term for Fluffhead because it rarely jams outside of another Alpine Valley show that we might want to talk about the very next year. This Fluffhead is not jammed. They tend to jam chart Fluffheads that they sort of think are notable for its energy or playing They just say that this is a crisp rendering, while not impeccable, it's still unusually sharp for the period, right?
I would agree.
Their prowess is kind of, I would say, starting to fade a little in 1998. And let's be clear, they're starting to party more, and the flubs are starting to get more regular. They're not quite the crisp, just monster of tightness that is like 93, 94 Phish anymore. But the fact that they can still friggin' do a crisp rendering of Fluffhead in summer '98 in a second set is, yeah, I would never complain about, even though there's no jamming, just like let's just have a nice tight Fluffhead. Really fun.
And we get roped in a little bit back to the recording for the new album mode with Brian and Robert. I love this song so much when it's well played and the vocal harmonies are on point, which is so difficult to do live. I think it may be the best Phish ballad when those two boxes are checked. This one isn't flawless, but it's very close, and it's a nice fade out to end it. I love this song. What a nice landing pad after Fluffhead.
Yeah, and I can't remember if I even knew this song at this point, but I agree. Just a beautiful little ditty, and people complain about their songwriting, but they do have some really good songs in their catalog, and this is one of them for sure.
I agree. And talking about people who have really good songs in their catalog, they take from Neil Young next. We go back in the 1998 Time Machine. They play Albuquerque, which I love that they cover it, a kind of lesser known Neil Young song, except to Phish heads, of course. It was played 9 times in 1998 and then only 8 times since, as of today.
Yeah, and this too, I guess some might complain that you have two kind of ballads, one after another, but this one is a really delicate number, and it has that just really quietness, which I think harkens back to the Tweezer in terms of this kind of patient quietness. The solos in it kind of like sort of like flow from the piano through the guitar, and it's very delicate, beautiful type of rendering of this song. And again, my Neil Young fandom really came after this show, so I'm trying to remember if I even knew this as a Neil Young song. I think some folks in the crowd kind of alerted me to what was happening. It's certainly one I would love to see these days, and they should play it more often, I would say.
I agree. Bring back acoustic guitars on stage.
Cool, they did that with Sleep this
That's
run,
right.
and they should do more of it, including the my friend intro on acoustic.
Yes.
It's something they used to do. Yeah.
Switch it around, yes. And then after those two ballads, though, we are no longer laying down. There is the highest energy Chalk Dust Torture, extremely fast, which isn't unusual for Chalk Dust, but a little shocking compared to what we're used to now in 2025, 2026. Yeah. This one is off the charts with crazy tension and release. So it might have been typical for the day, but listening back and wallowing in nostalgia as we do on this podcast, it really takes me back and kind of reminds us, oh, wait, this song used to be driven at 99 miles per hour.
And again, it reminded me of the Birds of a Feather, and then basically the same part of the first set, kind of bringing this sort of raging tension and release type jamming to kind of wake everyone up before the set comes to a close. But yeah, this is kind of Phish bringing back their kind of just high energy tension and release craziness that they perfected back in those days before they kind of tried to slow things down,
Yeah, they nail it too. Before closing with, well, I'll put it this way. Trey says how much they love playing Alpine Valley, and then they just bust out Frankenstein like it's no big thing. It's the 5th cover song of the show with another one to come in the encore.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. And I will also add that this isn't prog, I would say. It's a classic rock song, but it's really not an easy song to play. It's got extremely composed and technical stuff, and not just for Trey. Paige has to get on that keytar, whatever you call that thing, to play those lines, and it's they play such a tight version of it, and it just again shows that their musicianship to be able to nail such a fierce and complicated rock anthem like this is really impressive.
Yeah, and the thing about those rock anthems, I'm just gonna skip ahead also to the encore when they play and debut Been Caught Stealing. And the thing is, they're really playing to their demographic. They know who their fans are, right? We grew up on Led Zeppelin and classic rock, so we know Ramble On. We know Frankenstein. That is kind of the biggest rock and roll riff etched into everybody's DNA, I would say, between like what, 1975 and 1988. Just everyone knows that riff.
Yeah.
It didn't. So everyone knows that. And then Been Caught Stealing, we were already, if not adults, at least young adults by the time Jane's Addiction came out. And it was certainly a staple of the MTV era. Everyone knows that video of the guy dressing up like a pregnant lady and going through the supermarket. They break into this crowd favorite. I'm not sure how many people would have known what they were playing until Trey starts singing, though. Because at least on the audience recording, it doesn't sound very clear because it's just a lot of distortion.
Yeah, I remember Jane's Addiction was like my older brother's favorite band. He liked a lot of punk music and a lot of stuff I thought was just strange and I didn't quite understand. I was in my Def Leppard phase at the time. But Jane's Addiction was one that I remember once I got into what you said, like your grunge phase, your Pearl Jam, and I really took a liking to Jane's Addiction. And this is obviously one of their classics. And I personally knew what it was right away and was like, oh my God, they're playing another crazy cover that they've never played before. Another interesting thing, at least on the live Phish recording, it sounds to me like, and I imagine Page must have had a sample or something, but there's the dogs barking, like, roof, roof,
Really?
roof.
Maybe that's the distortion that I hear in the audience recording.
Yeah, I mean, it's straight from the actual song and the studio recording, but I don't know how they replicated that song, but it sounds exactly like the Jane's Addiction version. Like, roof, roof, roof.
Yeah.
And so they had that nailed. My memory was that live, we kind of felt like Trey's vocals here were, it's very high, and it seemed like he was kind of struggling to sing it. But I will say on re-listen, I actually think it sounds good. Like it's a really good, faithful rendering of this classic song. Trey's a good singer. He's not gonna blow you away with his singing, but he hits the notes as far as I can tell. And it was actually making me think of that, because they also play Sabotage, right? Which is sort of a similar. And maybe I had that negative reaction to his vocals in that when I saw them play that, and maybe I don't know when I saw it, 98 or somewhere around there. I will say, just re-listening, I feel like they did a great job with it. And again, just shocking and tore the house down, and everyone was like, wow, they're playing another incredibly classic song cover, and it's very exciting.
Well, that's the thing with the covers that they play this show, at least Ramble On and Been Caught Stealing, they are unquestionably reaching outside of their vocal range. There's no way, anyone could say, I'm going to sing Ramble On by Led Zeppelin. I'm going to sing Robert Plant. Unless you have that power, and Jane's Addiction, it's not like they're the most powerful singers, but like you said, it's the highest register you could go, and you got to be able to play it or sing it with confidence to get there. Trey doesn't quite, but he does at the same time. It's like when it's karaoke night, basically, and you have, again, 17 or 20,000 people singing along with you. So at the end, what difference does it make if everyone's feeling it?
Yeah, and I'm imagining like a backstage interaction with Paige being like, "Hey Trey, I could take this one, because I can sing higher if you want." And Trey just be like, "No, I'm going to sing it. It's going to be awesome. Let's go."
Much fun. It's too much fun.
It is, and you can feel he's having fun singing it because again,
of course,
it's such a Great song.
And they don't close it there. They close it with Tweezer Reprise, the only way to go after such an epic show that encapsulates, again, in my opinion, an entire calendar year stylistically in one show.
The best 4 minutes of rock and roll right there. It's always a raging ender to the show. And I happened to also be this year at the Tweezer Reprise Fest, and it's back. Listening to it again the last few days, I could never look at the song the same. There were some sort of cool down parts of the second set, so closing this one off in properly raging form seemed appropriate, and a good capper for, again, to me, the flagship of the show is the Tweezer. So you gotta close the deal with the Reprise.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on today to review this show, August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley. I don't know if I'd call it a hidden gem, but when you talk about like the top 5 shows of 1998, I don't know how often this one comes up. So it is certainly worth, if not that discussion, worth a listen if you haven't heard it before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk about Phish.
And that's it for today's conversation with Matt Huber about August 1st, 1998 at Alpine Valley. As I mentioned during the introduction, though, this was a pretty nerdy episode, so we have to dive quite deep to make sure we got everything covered.
Attendance bias fact check.
Matt's second show was at Red Rocks in 1996. He mentions the riots from those shows. So in a nutshell, in case you're unfamiliar, by the summer of 1996, Phish was becoming almost too popular for their own good, and they were outgrowing some of their favorite classic venues, including Red Rocks Amphitheater in Morrison, Colorado. They tried to satisfy demand by playing 4 nights at Red Rocks, but so many ticketless fans showed up in the small town, and some even camped out on the town sidewalks, that police were called out. This led to clashes between fans and the authorities. The rumor is that Phish was banned from ever performing at the venue again, although it should be noted those rumors were never justified or at least never confirmed. But as Matt noted, the band returned for 4 nights in 2009, that time without incident. Matt is correct, the band did open up the second set of December 30th, 2025 with Ghost. Matt's dream song for Phish to cover is Dark Star by the Grateful Dead, and he mentions the 1999 Phil and Friends show where Trey and Paige joined Phil Lesh for a 3-night run at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco. All 3 of those shows were covered on this podcast with special guest Charlie Dirksen. In addition, the August 9th, 1998 show at Virginia Beach where Phish played Terrapin Station has also been discussed on this podcast with guest Dave Waxman. And some more 1998. Matt name checks the famous show from November 2nd, 1998, when Phish played all of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album inside a version of Harpua. That show is also covered on Attendance Bias with guest Sean Fawcett. I didn't take a deep dive, but after at least a once-over on Phish.net, it does appear as though this is the only time to date that Esther has appeared in the middle of a Mike's Groove. A little info on Phish's jazz standards, including Megillah. Matt was right. At the time of this recording, the band hasn't played the jazz original since July 22nd, 2023 at Deer Creek. It would mark quite the bust out if they decided to bring it back. They haven't played Caravan since December 29th, 1996 at the Spectrum in Philly. Take the A-Train was last played on April 13th, 1994 at the Beacon Theater in New York City. And finally, Donna Lee was last played on July 25th, 1993 at Waterloo Village in New Jersey. As described by Matt, Phish played a number of shows around Burlington, Vermont in the late 80s through 1991 as the Johnny B. Fishman Jazz Ensemble with their explicit goal of refining the jazz chops. Very few set lists, let alone full recordings, exist. And finally, for those of us in the Bring Back Albuquerque camp, it was last played not that long ago, October 13th, 2023 at the United Center in Chicago. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Matt Huber for joining me today, Phish.net for their help with the fact check, Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode, and the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to support music education for children in schools. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You could leave a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You could follow Attendance Bias on social media, mostly Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. And you could always go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can to support the show. Every penny helps to keep the show in production. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.